I can say without any hesitation, you probably have drafted more contracts than any lawyer in Nigeria. So it's my pleasure to have Ame Ogie with us today. And we're going to be talking about, we're going to have a discussion. You can join us, drop your questions. We're going to be talking about surrogacy. For those who are uninitiated, because sometimes people confuse surrogacy and use of donor eggs together. They're two different things. Surrogacy, what we're going to be discussing today, is the practice where a woman agrees to carry a baby or babies for another woman or a couple, who we either call the commissioning or intending parents. So it's different from use of donor eggs, please. So what we're going to be discussing today, essentially, is surrogacy. Now, as for me to just start this off, of course, many of us know that there are two types of surrogacy. There is a traditional surrogacy where the surrogate is not genetically involved. In other words, we're not using our eggs. I'm sorry, the traditional surrogacy where we use our eggs. She's genetically involved, so it's our eggs that is being used. So most of the time, that's insemination. Different from what we call gestational surrogacy or IVF surrogacy, where we're using IVF. And because of the experience over time, people now say, look, you get a donor, use the sperm, or you are using the woman's eggs, and this surrogate is only carrying the baby. And so from that, so many things have arisen, and therefore I'm going to allow Ame Ogie to give us share with us his wealth of experience in this, because we're talking about legal process. Please, Ame, take us through this legal process. Oh, Bola Ola is here. Okay, wonderful. This is great. Oh, you have some eggheads joining us.
Okay, Dr. Ajayi, thank you so much. It's been nice being associated with you for close to 20 years now in this industry. Let me start by welcoming all of you, although I cannot see you, but I can see that there are a number of participants being showed by. I will start by saying that when we talk about legal process, we have to understand first and foremost, as I'm sure most of you know, that Nigeria has not promulgated any laws specifically regulating surrogacy practice. Unlike in the UK, where you have the Surrogacy Act 2005. And it is important to note right from the beginning that in Nigeria, there's also no law banning or prohibiting surrogacy. None, contrary to what some people have been writing. Due respect to my learned friends, interpreting the provisions of Section 30 of the Child Rights Act and Section 26, I think, of the Child Rights Law of Lagos State. There is no law prohibiting surrogacy. Now, be that as it may, what do we try to do here? We try as much as possible to follow the basic principles of contract law. And what are these basic principles? Offer, acceptance, consideration, okay? Legal capacity to contract, and I will touch on this briefly as I speak. Intention to be legally bound by the agreement, and that the contract must not be, please let's note this, the contract must not be tainted with illegality or contrary to public policy. So if these 6 principles are adhered to, we can put together a contract that would and ordinarily should be enforced by a court of law if need be. Now, there are 2 types of surrogacy arrangements. You have the altruistic surrogacy and you have the commercial surrogacy. Altruistic, as some of us would know, is usually when no compensation is paid, apart from just meeting some of the basic needs of the surrogate, all right? And this is usually arranged between close family members and friends of the intended parents. And then we have commercial surrogacy, in which the surrogate is fairly compensated. Again, I underline the word fairly, because I'm sure we'll come back to that later. Fairly compensated for her time, energy sacrifice, and physical and emotional challenges. In Nigeria, what we practice is more of a subtle, or the kind of agreements we draft, is more of a subtle type of commercial surrogacy. Because of the fact that most of the surrogates that I personally have dealt with since about the year 2005, 2006, they demand one form of compensation as is at least in excess of what you would ordinarily be giving to a family member or a friend. And also, those surrogates are not family members and are not friends of the intended couple, all right? So I want to touch on another important point, which is, because I've had this question asked a lot. Why is it that you only prepare surrogacy agreements for married couples? Why don't you do surrogacy agreements for singles, you know, who want to use a surrogate to have a child? Now, I reiterate that before I personally can draft a contract, the surrogate, the intended parents must be married. Why is this so? Although it is not an offense to have children outside marriage in Nigeria, and there is no provision of the law that says if you have children outside marriage, you'll be sent to jail or there's a punishment. Also, Section 42(2) of the Nigerian Constitution in a way outlaws discrimination against children born out of wedlock. However, certain provisions of our laws still refer to illegitimate children. Illegitimate children. You will find these provisions in the provisions of our Evidence Act. You will find these provisions also the provisions of our Matrimonial Causes Act. And for those who are well informed, who are joining this call, you will note that there's still a debate, a huge debate ongoing as to whether Section 42(2) of the Nigerian Constitution actually legitimizes children born out of wedlock, or whether it just make provisions for them not to be discriminated against in terms of property rights, etc. So if it is that illegitimate is still used, as a matter of fact, the dictionary definition of illegitimate says inter alia that not recognized as lawful offspring, born of parents not married to each other, not sanctioned by law. How then can we draft agreements when it is that certain provisions of our laws still refers to children born out of wedlock as illegitimate? So can we draft a legal agreement that has some level of illegality related to it? So that is why we don't draft agreements relating to people who are not married when it comes to surrogacy. Now, the next question is, how do you source a surrogate? Now, in my years of experience, initially when this process started in 2005, 2006, actively, surrogates were mainly provided and produced by the intended parents. But over the past 4 or 5 years, we've been seeing situations whereby some surrogates are introduced through agencies, okay? And while we do not know how those agencies practice internally, if it is that you are sourcing a surrogate through an agent, you would have to sign a minimum of 2 agreements. One, you have to have an agreement prepared between you and the agency, defining the relationship between intended parents and the agency. And then the second agreement, which would then be between you, the intended parents, and the surrogate. The surrogate also would in a proper arrangement, would also sign 2 agreements. We'll sign an agreement, one with the agency also, where the relationship between her and the agency will be specified. And another one, that's the second one I mentioned earlier, between the surrogate and the intended parent. Now, a very important and critical aspect of surrogates, because as we all know, the surrogates play a very important role in the legal process, is that the surrogate must be vetted. There must be a good and proper vetting. A background check must be done on that surrogate, and the intended parents must be satisfied with the result of that background check. Because from our experience, not too much, very few, we have seen a few surrogates who have almost turned out to be problematic. Now, usually we recommend that surrogates should be single. Initially, I mentioned that one of the principles of a valid contract is that the parties must have the legal capacity to contract. Now, why do you prefer single surrogates? Because she is not hindered in any form or manner to obtain the consent of the husband. If you're using a marriage surrogate, the surrogate must obtain the consent of the husband. So in order to avoid that problem, we usually recommend that the surrogate should be single. And also, with a marriage surrogate, you may also have.
Yes. Can I just interrupt you a little bit? But you do not. You do not disqualify people who are married. But
no, we do not. We do not. That's why I use the word encouraged. Okay. Encouraged, because as we lawyers, when doctor, it is not that we are also lazy, but when it is a marriage surrogate, we have more work to do, because we have to prepare additional documents for the surrogate's husband to sign. And family commitments may also get in the way, because as a matter of fact, we always, international best practices says that a surrogate must have had a child already. A surrogate should not be someone who has not had a child. So a married surrogate who has a husband who has children and family commitments is usually a bit more difficult to manage. Like, for example, we've had surrogates who the intended parents wanted to move from Lagos to Asaba, or move from one part of Lagos to maybe another part of the country. And then the husband was like, wow, why? You know, but with a single surrogate, it's easier to make those arrangements. Dr. Ajayi has already touched on the issue of gestational surrogation and traditional surrogacy. We, as in our practice, we recommend gestational because of the fact that right now in Nigeria, we are still waiting for a pronouncement, a legal pronouncement that will test some of these things that we are doing. But we know that if a matter goes before a judge, when it is that it can be proven scientifically that the surrogate was just a carrier with no genetic or biological link to the carrier, then there's a higher success of the chances of success for the intended parents. Then the last issue I want to talk on before I take questions is the issue of egg or sperm. To a large extent, I think in all our years of drafting surrogacy agreements, it's only in one rare instance that we were almost being asked to use the egg and a sperm that was donated. But we usually would encourage that the sperm should be, because Africa, and to a large extent, Nigeria, and to a large extent, Africa is a patrilineal society. And we always most likely encourage that the sperm being used is that of the father. But again, in line with international best practices, one of either the eggs or the sperm must be that of the intended parents. Yes. We cannot prepare a surrogacy agreement that has egg and sperm from people who are not intended parents, because you see, the essence, like I mentioned, the issue of public policy earlier on, we also have a strong case. Morality is not law, and until morals are translated into law, they have no effect on law. But like I mentioned earlier, when I talked about legitimacy or illegitimacy or none, you know, when you present a matter before the judicial body and you say the sperm is not for review, the sperm is not mine, the egg is not mine as an intended parent, then the question then becomes, are you in any way related to that child? Okay, so that is why even in developed countries, it is usually it is stated that in the countries where surrogacy is allowed, that either the egg or the sperm must belong to one of the partners. Finally, a properly legal agreement must be drafted that makes provisions for the key issues such as compensations, breaches, cesarean sections, etc. At this point in time, I would pause, Doctor, so that it's not a monologue, and take contributions.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much, Ame. Yes. One of the things that you said, which I wanted to either confirm or, so the contract is enforceable in law. Is that, am I right?
In Nigeria, like I said earlier, the feelers we have gotten from the judicial, or speaking informally with the judicial sector, that once it is that these 6 principles are in a contract, and mostly in a gestational surrogacy arrangement, okay, the contract to be enforced.
So there's no precedence yet in Nigeria?
There is no precedent yet concerning, because you see the nature, even in the few cases that we have had in which the surrogate breached, a very few, maybe like 2 or 3 cases in which the surrogate breached the terms of the agreement that the surrogate entered, the intended parents refused to enforce because of the nature of the agreement. You know, it has to do with a lot of confidentiality issues and all that. You know, so the intended parent just let it slide. Those point in time. But those cases, conception had not occurred, and luckily in the whole since 2006 or 2005 we've been doing this. There's never been an issue of dispute relating to as to I want to take the hand back and all that. So that has not been tested yet.
Okay.
But I'm aware that you see there's 1 or 2 cases in Lagos State High Court which have not seized on the facts yet. You know, so I cannot make comments on this.
Okay. Yeah, well, one question that usually couples, especially those, you know, majority of these patients coming from outside the country sometimes. And one of the things that they ask, which is, do I need to adopt these children? Yeah, before somebody brings it up, let me. let's
That's a very, very good question, Doctor. about 7 years ago, we had to do a research on this. Now, as we know, the issue that I don't want to be too technical here, so that everybody listening can understand. Issues that have to do with children fall under what we call the residual list in the Constitution, which means it is the states that makes those laws. All right, we have a federal law that deals with children. I think that's the Child's Rights Law, but Lagos State government has the Child Rights Act, is one that deals with federal and applies only in Abuja, which is the federal capital territory. Now, in Lagos, we have the Child Rights Law of 2007. Interestingly, if I remember correctly, it is only in one passing sub-paragraph. Let me see if I can, I think it's section 123 of the Child's Rights Law that says on the application of a married couple, if they consist of a parent and a step-parent of the child, the court shall dismiss the application if it considers that the matter will be better dealt with under possession and custody of children. Now, this tends to allude to the fact that, yes, if it is the intended parents, the biological father's sperm that was used, and a donor egg that was used, yes, the mother can adopt. But let me make you laugh. When we went to the relevant office of the Lagos State government then, to make inquiries about the procedure for a stepmother, in this case, who was not a biological mother, to adopt the child, they told us that, what are we talking about? That the woman is already the stepmother of the child now. That there is no, what are we doing here? There is no provision for that. That is not the stepmother already? That the stepmother, and we said no. We're trying to explain the issue, how it went, and they didn't seem at that point in time to have a proper clue as to what was going on. But the law tends to suggest that. But again, something that is important that we must note is what is the circumstance, what is the basic circumstances under which an adoption should be done. Most times, adoption is for children that have been abandoned, neglected, or to a large extent destitute to have been placed for adoption. All right? So I think this is an area of the law that still needs to be looked at by the relevant agencies in terms of when it comes to this scenario that you just mentioned.
Yeah, thank you. Now, there's some questions I wanted to, I still have mine, but let's take your. Does a surrogate have the right to terminate pregnancy if she changes her mind about following through?
Good question. Very good question. Answering from the Nigerian perspective and based on the principles of contract we discussed earlier, the answer would be no. Because in every clause, there's every agreement we prepare, there's a clause that clearly addresses this issue. And it states that prior to when the surrogate signs that contract, that clause must be explained to the surrogate. There's a stage at which the surrogate, we call it to a large extent the point of no return. There's a stage that the surrogate, because as you know, doctor, the surrogate would have gone to counseling, would have gone to the necessary counseling and all that. And even prior to that stage of insemination, after all the procedures of getting to check that she's okay, she's taking all the drugs, preparatory to insemination, she still has the chance, the choice to say, I'm not proceeding with this. But once insemination is done and it's successful, there's a clause herein that says she cannot terminate pregnancy unless medically, unless it is based on a medical advice in her own best interest to preserve her health and her own life, or to preserve the life of the child. Okay, yeah. And when consideration is furnished in terms of a fair compensation to the surrogate, which the surrogate has accepted, whether it is phased out in payment or not, because we spread out the payment to the surrogate. Once the contract has taken effect, ordinarily she should not. But like I'm saying to you, these principles have not been tested in a court of law because the situation has not arisen in our close to about 16 years of doing this, in which a surrogate has said she wants to terminate a pregnancy.
Thank
As
you.
a matter of fact, the surrogate is always very happy to conclude so that I collect the balance money.
Exactly. Okay, this question, well, I will still read it. Please, I would like to ask how to handle surrogacy for mature singles.
Mature singles, there's no difference.
Yeah.
I don't. The question is not too clear.
Yeah.
If mature singles are no longer using their eggs or using their sperm, I've spoken about that. We've had one also trying to respect confidentiality, even as we talk about this. We've had one instance in which such a scenario almost occurred, but we did not encourage it when you use eggs that are not that of the intended mother or the sperm of the elderly couple.
Mm.
So if either of them, if the sperm of the elderly couple is particularly that of the man, still okay. Of course, it goes through the normal surrogacy route or route, depending if you are listening to me from if you're in America or Nigeria.
Yeah. Yeah, Olade has raised his hand again. He was the one who asked that question. Please type your question and then I'll read it. Then you have a question from the president of FI and his wife. How do you explain embryo adoption in surrogacy?
We don't deal with embryo adoption. That is not within our area of practice. What we deal with are the terms, like, I don't understand what it means by that, but I do want to throw some light on that.
Yeah, sometimes some people actually adopt embryos. For example, when the sperm and the eggs are not up to par, they can adopt embryos.
Okay, we've not done that, and we will not. I can state to you, sir, clearly that I, Ame Ogie, will not prepare an agreement that has embryo adoption if one of the embryos is not related to either the biological father or the couple. No.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, I have some questions here. I still have some printed out because also we're on Facebook. Is it possible for intending parents to check in takes by the surrogate that might be dangerous? Okay, to check intakes by the surrogate that might be dangerous to the health of a fetus. Drinking, drugs.
Oh,
that's wonderful.
That is a very wonderful question. And I applaud the person who asked that question because that is a very big challenge. In fact, when we have our legal consultation, I spend a lot of time on that particular issue. You see, we are beginning to have intended parents who do not want to get involved in surrogacy processes. Okay, I call them distant intended parents. And the success of a surrogacy process depends on supervision. You know, I have on a few occasions been emotionally involved when it is that we have had successful implantations, and due to some negligence on the part of surrogate, there is a failure along the line. So supervision is very, very, very critical. Now we are having instances in which intended parents are using intermediaries. Intermediaries who, inverted commas, open and close, may not even have the time to check on this surrogate. And that's why initially I spoke about vetting, background checks. If you do a proper background check and you have effective supervision of the surrogate, either by the intended parents, and if they're not in Nigeria, they are in the diaspora, a committed intermediary. Because I must reemphasize that the surrogate has signed a document. The surrogate has taken benefit. And we always emphasize to them that you are under obligation to do the things that you have committed, you have contracted to do. So if an intermediary pops into a surrogate's house unexpected, it will, to a large extent, keep the surrogate in check. Now, for those who can afford it, we sometimes suggest that, in fact, I even show them the app I have on my own telephone that I can use with the CCTV to monitor certain things. But I tell them, don't put the CCTV inside the house. If you can put a CCTV, if you are renting an apartment, you can put one in front, the front door. The front door, to look at the entrance to the house where you have rented. So you can see who is going in and going out. You know, just a psychological thing about, oh, surrogate, my eyes are on you. And then effective supervision of the surrogate, then you can control the use of these substances, the use of even having male friends coming to come and visit them when they're not supposed to have anybody visiting them, and all that. But the answer to that is in supervision. I would just say that effective supervision.
Thank you so much. Because there's a question here too, which I think you have answered indirectly. It says, Barrister and Doctor, have you had a situation where the surrogate runs away with the pregnancy?
No, we have not. But we have had a situation in which a surrogate haven't conceived, apartment was rented, and we said to surrogate, come and move to apartment now. Surrogate said, no, I'm still enjoying my parents' house. And we said, no. This is not what you signed for. You're supposed to be staying in this one and so place. And the surrogate dodged here, dodged there. But I had earlier mentioned the issue of background check, the issue of vetting, and again, I didn't mention this, the issue of referrals. When you are getting a surrogate, at times it's good to have, for the surrogate to come through good referrals. We were able to reach out to the person who referred, and the person was able to speak some sense. And then, of course, I also came in, issued some 2 threats, and then she eventually moved to the place that was rented for her, and the pregnancy proceeded effectively. Now, let me also say here, Doctor, particularly for those in the diaspora, please, when you are using an intermediary, please emphasize to your intermediary that the surrogate is not a domestic assistant. The surrogate is not a house help. The surrogate should be treated with respect. We have had instances in which surrogacy processes almost were jeopardized because for effective supervision, surrogates were moved into the homes of a relative, so they don't use cocaine, they don't use illegal substances and all that, and they started treating these surrogates as house helps. And of course, the surrogates revolted. But for, in our intervention, speaking to them and making peace between all the parties, those processes would have been very, very complicated.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, I'm just going to ask this question, so it's I think it's a straightforward answer. Is surrogacy limited to assisted reproduction, like IVF, or can conjugal sex pass for surrogacy?
No, conjugal sex cannot pass.
No, but you know, on a very light note, I've heard somebody come to the clinic with like that, saying that they have a surrogate and he's going to sleep with her, and then they. So I said, okay, so why do you need me?
You know, there was an incident that was brought to us years ago in a particular locality of Lagos State, in which a man allowed his mechanic to sleep with. The young man was not married at that point in time. He allowed his mechanic to sleep with his wife discreetly and fathered 2 children. And when the young man got married, the young man couldn't have children as Providence would have it. And years down the line, the young man came to the man's house to knock on the door, that those children were his. And no problem started. So no, surrogacy, no physical contact.
Yeah, can you clarify if a donor sperm is used, would the adoption policy apply?
If a donor sperm is used, like I said, if it is the egg of the mother, the child rights part of Lagos, why not give him too much details, tries to say yes, an adoption can be done. But I also mentioned that we operate in a patrilineal society. Patrilineal society. So I can't talk too much in a forum like this, doctor, because our audience will understand that there are issues of confidentiality at play here also. But I would strongly advise against using donor sperm, because you don't know tomorrow. I don't want to say too much. We've had instances when you use a donor sperm, inheritance rights are affected.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not going to ask the cost questions. So anybody who has asked cost questions, we want people to understand how to go through this potentially slopey, very, very steep slopes. So we are not talking about cost. So this person who asked the other question the other time has refined the question. He said, the question, if I want a surrogate, I'm not married, I'm working, and then I would like to get a surrogate using my eggs, but want someone to carry the baby for me. So what she's saying is that she's single, she's not married, okay, but she can afford it, she's working, and she wants somebody to carry, she wants to use her eggs and wants somebody to carry the baby for her.
Yes, I have already answered this question when I started. Right now in Nigeria, as it stands today, the papers have been written on this, and even on this call, I'm sure there are some people who may even have more expertise on that issue, on this issue than me. The question is that as it stands today in Nigeria, the only institution recognized in which children can be invited, comma, open and close, legitimately brought forth into this world is a marriage situation. And that's why I dealt with it. It was the second issue that I dealt with. Now, if it is that it is said in our evidence, let me educate our readers, our listeners a little, so that they will understand. Section 165 of the Evidence Act says, without prejudice to Section 84 of the Matrimonial Causes Act, where a person was born during the continuance of a valid marriage between his mother and any man, or within 280 days after the dissolution of the marriage, the mother remaining unmarried, the court shall presume that the person in question is the legitimate child of that man. Is a legitimate child. So when you also look at the Marriage Act, of our Nigerian Matrimonial Causes Act. Look at section 69. It says children of the marriage. It refers to legitimate children. It refers to legitimate children. 69. So if you are not talking about a single mother who can afford it, using a donor sperm to perform a surrogacy in a patrilineal society, the question then becomes, who is the father of that child? And since it is that a surrogacy agreement is going to be prepared between the parties, the question then becomes, if that surrogacy, if the surrogate has a dispute with this intended parent that is a single mother tomorrow, and that agreement is taken to a Nigerian law court to enforce, the Nigerian judge enforce that agreement? The answer is no.
No. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Yeah, somebody is asking, are you advising I know the surrogate?
Good question. Not necessarily. But whoever is acting as your intermediary. Okay, let me tell you what we've been doing recently. COVID has its blessings, it has its numerous disadvantages. For a while now, we've been doing consultations of COVID virtually. So what we do is, after the background checks, the counseling and all that, we, for intended parents who do not wish to be seen by the surrogate, we have our sessions with them first. After that, we tell them to go back. That is, turn off their video, and we tell them to listen to the consultation that we're having with the surrogate. And when we then engage with the surrogate, we invited come open and close, we drilled surrogate. We have an interesting conversation with the surrogate. After that, we ask the surrogate to drop out of the call, and then we bring the intended parents back on and we say, okay, you have heard us. Your intermediary may have been dealing with this surrogate, but now you have had the opportunity to hear the surrogate. And I must tell you, in close to 10 times we have adopted this procedure. We ask the intended parents after, we say, what did you think about the surrogate? And all of them, they have all said, wow, we found the surrogate very, very okay. Yes, some of them have expressed one or two reservations. You know, particular intended parents said, the surrogate talks too much, but she appears to be, she's okay. But they were able to get a first-hand assessment of the surrogate. Yes, so if you're not going to know the surrogate, then have an intermediary who knows the surrogate. But somebody must know the surrogate.
Okay, I'm going to answer one. I won't even bother you. Somebody says, does surrogacy feel like IVF? It is IVF. So he has the same success and the failure of it. So in this contract, how is intercourse by the surrogate addressed? Is there any control over this? Does the sending parent have any right to hinder a surrogate from having sex with their partner during the time of surrogacy?
And that is the reason why we suggest that the surrogate should be single. Okay? When the surrogate is married, we usually have an additional section to that contract in which the husband himself, not just the surrogate now, the husband also signs documentation agreeing that he is going to abstain. Now, this is a very important question, Doctor, because there's another aspect that deals with internal, first and foremost, we evaluate the surrogate. The counselor evaluates. We, the lawyers, also from our experience, we evaluate. We try to, nobody is completely, you cannot be completely sure about somebody, the responsibility level of a person. But we, as much as possible, try to make them understand that while it is that we cannot put the camera inside your bedroom because we'll be infringing the relevant laws, we let them know that if you have intercourse, like there was a surrogate who didn't have a successful implantation. And after a short while, she came back to say, oh, the implantation has not been successful. And we told her that medical science can determine this. And of course, we're able to prove that that so-called implantation was not as a result of the surrogacy process that took place. So while it is that these clauses are there, there's an absolute clause in the agreement that says you are not to have any form of intercourse during the period of the surrogacy. But again, enforceability becomes the issue. And to a large extent, we tend to rely on the fact that the surrogate herself wants a successful outcome and would limit herself to the terms of this contract.
Wow. Well, there's so many questions left, but I think I'll just ask you one more, and then the others we answer them off line, because we've actually taken 45, 46 minutes now. Yes. At what point does the surrogacy contract terminate?
Very, very good question. Now, surrogacy contract terminates. I would quickly answer this two ways. If the birth is by a cesarean section, surrogacy contract will not end until the surrogate is discharged, certified to be medically fit by a qualified and licensed medical practitioner. So if it is through a cesarean section, we will not say, oh, the baby has been had. No. Until the last bill of the surrogate is paid, the contract is effective. But if it's not through a cesarean section, then when the child is handed over to the intended parents and all obligations under the contract are fulfilled, surrogacy agreement comes to an end. And that is why we recommend that for intended parents providing accommodation for surrogates that they have rented, because some of them try to prorate the accommodation they are renting to 9 months. I will tell them that most landlords don't rent 9 months. They rent 1 year. So you give the extra 3 or so months on top as a gift to the surrogate. Now, this is irrespective of, even if the child is delivered before 38 or so weeks, if the child is premature and is a live child and all the necessary compensations are paid, then the contract comes to an end. Now, just before I round up, Doctor, recently we were invited to this session by the Lagos State government on thinking about passing surrogacy laws. I think for Nigeria, we should be looking at a blend of altruistic and commercial surrogacy. We should not, Nigeria is a dynamic country. Yeah. Look for a blend, and then I think we should study the South African model. The South African model is okay, in which when it is that parties come to an agreement on the terms of a surrogacy contract, they take it to a court. And the judge, before the surrogacy arrangement starts, the judge gives that agreement validity.
Okay.
So once it is that the judge gives that agreement validity, all the issues of whether it is whatever kind of sperm or whatever kind of egg, or becomes a non-issue once the judge has certified it. Yes. So,
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I was going to ask you that. Yeah, but there's a very interesting question. I can't just get it off my skin because this person says, to the best of my knowledge, you have approached this issue purely from legal perspective. There is no way the use of illegitimate offspring can be discarded while relying on the legal perspective. However, marriage is largely contracted without recourse to legal institution. In other words, marriage is more social than legal. It must be one of your colleagues that is writing this.
That is why I said there's a debate on that issue.
This should equally be given attention on the issue. Again, I want to know what the background checks conducted on intending surrogates are made of. You have already answered some of these things. We can't go through. But is this social and legal that interested me?
You see, Doctor, the key thing is if it is that some of our laws, as it is still on the record today, do not refer to illegitimate child. Irrespective of the fact that no child is deprived of inheritance rights as a reason of the circumstances of his or her birth. All right? And then in as much as the Lagos State Child Rights Law also provide for provisions under which a single parent can also, can also have rights relating to children. But the point is that as far as we still have some of these illegitimate references in our laws, then, and as long as it is that you are that forum the Lagos State government had in which we had various religious groups that were there. Yes, so we have to be very, very careful to ensure that prior to when, and sincerely speaking, it's going to be a very difficult assignment to find a balanced position that allows single parents, single people to use donor eggs, donor sperms to undergo surrogacy, so that it can be enforced. We are looking at it from the perspective of the enforceability of the contract in case there is a default. Because we're talking about the contract was not affected with illegality or against public policy. So if you are drafting a contract right from the beginning and there's been big problems, to enforcing it, then there's a problem right from the onset.
Okay. Yeah, thank you so very much, Ame. Let me confess to you too. I think this is the first time I'm also understanding this single or no single. I just when we started it and you said no, not to single, I took it with faith. I said, okay, I must know what he's talking about. I'm not a lawyer, so and I agreed. Yeah, but now I think I understand better now. And seriously, I think on the long run is in defense of the people who are making this, who are going into this contract. What is the point of you holding something that you cannot actually defend you? You understand? I think that's what we need to let them see. But if you you don't mind that, because I think it's honest that a lawyer is telling you that the contract you are going to sign can really, when push comes to shove, cannot defend you. So thank you so much for this. And I think on this point, I'll just bring this to it. We're going to send some of the questions to you because there's still many of them, which you have to use your own legal mind, not my own church mind now to answer them. So great having you. Thank you so much. And we'll still do this again. And
thank you so much.
Thank you so much for joining. Please give them your last words.
Thank you so much. Surrogacy is a process that has come to stay, and it is a way forward for a lot of people who unfortunately find themselves in that situation. And it's the same way when we started in 2005, 2006. The reformations are going on, we are refining the process, and we pray that soon relevant government agencies will take this up and do the needful so that we have a uniform system that we can prepare these agreements on. Thank you.
Yeah, I think actually to end this, even in the UK, I think it was just in 2019 or 2020, that they passed this about this single thing.
Yes, they just allowed that now to say one person.
Yeah.
But even if you are doing surrogacy, one, it must be the egg of one of the year. But Nigeria has not got into that stage yet.
No, we're still 20 years behind. We'll get there.
We'll
Especially with Lagos State starting this now, I guess is a step in the right direction. We just need to do our homework before we come on stage. So thank you so much. And then I think with people like you, we continue to talk about it, and it will be easier for government to create something out for everybody. Thank you once again, and we'll see you some other time. Thank you.
Sir.
Bye.